Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's right at 12 o'clock Central, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Larissa DeLuna with the American Heart Association, and I'd like to welcome you to the American Heart Association's Cardiac Boot Camp series. This is our 5th webinar in our 7-week series. For a full list of all upcoming webinars, you can visit heart.org/SWA quality. Before we get started, we'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. To avoid background noise, all lines have been placed on mute. For questions, you can unmute your line by pressing *6 or use the Q&A section of WebEx to type in a question. Attendance at this webinar will earn you 1 CE credit. Instructions to claim your credit will be sent after the webinar along with a copy of the slides. Today's webinar topic is collaborating with EMS, and our speaker is Sarah McMillan. Sarah is the Cardiovascular Accreditation and Quality Coordinator at Norman Regional Health System in Norman, Oklahoma. Sarah has a bachelor's degree in medical imaging from the University of Oklahoma and a master's in business administration from Oklahoma Christian University. She has been in her current role for 4 years, and prior to that, she spent 10 years in the cath lab. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sarah to get us started.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you guys about EMS collaboration today. And let's see, let me get my slides to forward. Okay, I have no disclosures. And so first I want to start off by kind of giving you an idea about my health system that I work for. So we have 3 campuses. My campus, the Healthplex, is a PCI center. And then we have 2 other campuses. They're both 6 miles away from our campus, and they're our referral facilities. So if a STEMI patient comes into one of those 2, then we transfer them here to the Healthplex. So since we're talking about EMS collaboration, I kind of wanted to give you an idea of what my experience is with EMS agencies. So we are located right outside Oklahoma City metro area. There's 9 PCI centers in the Oklahoma City metro, but because we're the furthest south, we're the closest PCI center to a very large rural area. And so you can see that we have a lot of EMS agencies that we collaborate with, and our patients come from quite long distances. So what is collaboration? Well, collaboration in healthcare is defined as healthcare professionals assuming complementary roles and cooperatively working together, sharing responsibility for problem solving and making decisions to formulate and carry out plans for patient care. So that can be summed up pretty much with one word, and that's teamwork. Basically, collaboration is teamwork. And teamwork is common to a system that has where everybody is working for the good of a goal. So, for example, you want to provide a high quality of care. And then also for those that have a common objective. So usually it's best patient outcome, meeting our metrics, and for those who work together to achieve that objective. So in order to have an effective team, there must be trust, respect, and collaboration. So when I was preparing my slides, I did a lot of research on EMS collaboration, and I came across a study where a group of physicians got together, and basically they found that all hospitals agree on the fact that EMS is critical to providing quality and timely care to AMI patients. There's evidence that suggests that active collaboration between hospitals and EMS is significantly associated with lower AMI mortality rates. So these physicians got together. They wanted to find out what are the top performing hospitals doing differently than the rest. What can we learn from those best performers? And so they went out and did a survey of those hospitals and asked them a bunch of questions. And so they found that the higher performing hospitals demonstrated closer collaboration relationship with EMS than the lower performers. Specifically, those facilities are invested in and committed to their EMS agencies. The 3 common characteristics that the top performers shared were that they have respect for EMS as valued professionals and colleagues. They demonstrated a strong communication and coordination with the EMS, and they actively engaged EMS in hospital AMI quality and improvement efforts. So let's take a closer look at what those characteristics look like. So the first one was respect EMS as valued professionals and colleagues. You want to value the EMS's clinical skills and judgment. You treat the EMS providers as healthcare professionals rather than technicians solely responsible for rapid transport. And you want to tolerate false activations if the tolerate false activations of the cath lab by EMS providers. It should be expected that your facility will have some canceled STEMI activations. If you don't have some, then actually you should be concerned that you're not activating all the STEMIs that you have, that you're under-activating. And false activation is not a bad thing, so it's important that we understand that it's a learning opportunity. And we would rather the staff come in to call off the code than to further delay care. So we always say, go ahead and activate it, even if you're in doubt, and then that way we can at least get the ball rolling and we can cancel it if we need to. And then invest in relationships with the EMS by building tight connections with them and making them part of your team. So in order to show, one of the ways that we can show that they're valued professionals and that they're our colleagues is to show appreciation and recognition of the importance of them to, they're an extension of our clinical care team. And so one of the ways that we can do that is through EMS Appreciation Week. It's a great opportunity to recognize their hard work. And it's actually perfect timing for this webinar because EMS Week is in this month, and it's coming up the week of May 27th. And so some ideas of ways that you can do that is maybe having an EMS appreciation luncheon, include dispatch, police, fire. We even have the mayor come out and do the proclamation for EMS Week. Also, I do what I like to call the tour to EMS. So I go around to all of those EMS agencies that I showed you on the map and bring them cookies and a handwritten card that says, thank you for all your hard work. We appreciate your partnership. And then in the past, we've also done a hometown hero celebration. So we did a touch a truck. We have all the trucks set up. And then we do vendor booths. We invited storm chasers because, those are really important to us here in Oklahoma since we're in Tornado Alley. And then we just had fun stuff for the kids to do, like snow cones, and just made it a community effort in appreciating the EMS in our city. And then also we want to collaborate on community education. That's another way that you can develop show them that you're colleagues. And so we've started partnering with our EMS agency by doing hands-on CPR and heart attack symptoms education with them. So a lot of times they get invited to events that aren't necessarily health fairs. They may just be, one was the National Weather Service. They did a festival, and they wanted, I should have told you guys this before. Our main EMS agency is actually part of our health system, so we own one of the EMS agencies that brings us patients, and so we work closely with them. But so they have all of these trailers for medical disaster response and all of that, and they bring them to these events. And so I've started setting up a table with them and bringing the CPR mannequins out there and doing hands-on CPR demonstrations and giving education about the signs and symptoms of a heart attack. And so that's been really great in just basically establishing a working relationship with them. And then also I've even included the stroke coordinator and invited her to come out and work with us as well. And then invited the emergency department staff to help me out. And so it's been really fun. And then another way that you can collaborate is by doing community STEMI drills. So we did a STEMI drill at a health club, and we even did it like a true call. So we called 911. We included dispatch and fire in the drill. And, we do a lot of STEMIs on a routine basis, but it was just kind of, it was a learning experience a little bit, but mostly it just kind of was a team building thing. we had a lot of fun, and I got to know some more of the paramedics that I haven't already met before. And then another way is to do EMS ride-alongs. So any of the new employees that work in the cath lab, it's a requirement during their orientation that they do an EMS ride-along. And so it's good for them to see their world and to understand everything that they have to do for that patient while they're transporting them to the hospital. A lot of times I get questions, wondering about delays, or why didn't they start 2 IVs, or, why did this happen? And so I think for them to do the ride-along and experience, how short amount of time that they might have to do all of these things that they're doing for these patients, it's a good way to help them understand the whole big picture. So the other thing that they said that these hospitals had was strong communication and coordination with EMS. So they said that these hospitals demonstrated these things. So basically they ensured timely bidirectional communication between the hospital and EMS. So basically to me that's feedback. You want to make sure that they're giving real-time feedback. Ensure EMS providers have up-to-date evidence-based clinical knowledge base, and cultivate shared practice, patient-focused mission with EMS providers to improve AMI care and outcomes. So one of the things that they said, a way to develop a strong communication with EMS is for the hospital to designate a EMS liaison. I know there are some hospitals that actually have this position. For us that don't, then usually that is the job of the chest pain coordinator. And even if you do have an EMS liaison, I think it's good that the chest pain coordinators still perform these responsibilities, because you're the one that has that information specific to that AMI patient. And so you want to develop a relationship with them, communicate with maybe their medical director or the EMS chief, and develop that relationship so that you can have that two-way communication. And then you want to encourage an open line of communication, because you're their resource. So you want to be that person that they call when maybe a process didn't go correctly, or if they have any questions. So in all my research, I found this, and I found that it was kind of important to bring up. So when you have that person that is doing the collaboration or is that point of contact for the EMS, there's certain traits that are more effective in a collaborative leader. And so one of those is high energy. Basically, that person refuses to be deterred. They're very persistent. They don't get frustrated, because we all know trying to encourage change and improvement can take a long time. And so these type of personalities, they don't give up easily. And then they also don't, it's not all about them. They keep their egos in check, and they encourage group contribution. And then the second is passion. So they're very passionate about achieving their desired outcome. They seek other talented people to contribute, and the passion is about the outcome, not the income, about the outcome and not their self-image. The third is non-authoritative motivation. So they pull others rather than pushing them. They don't usually have a formal authority over their peers. They have to find non-directive ways to move people in a positive direction. And the fourth is the ability to make connections. So you want somebody that is able to work independently. So basically they depend on all of these different entities to improve and be successful, and they're able to work in those complex systems. So one of the things that is important for communication and coordination is to have regular meetings between the hospital and EMS. So I have a lot of EMS agencies that I work with, and so I'm not able to have, monthly meetings with each and every one of them, but I try to schedule routine visits to their stations. So I might have some time during one week, and so I'll call one of them up and say, hey, I'm going to come by this week and just touch base with you. And so that's my opportunity to discuss any needs or barriers with them, answer any questions, and it helps develop a relationship. Sometimes I'll bring the STEMI feedback flyers with me or any kind of data that I want to share with them as well. And then also it doesn't hurt if you bring like candy or cookies, because that always wins them over a little bit as well. So this is an example of one of the, just from going out and doing those meetings with them, this is one of the successes that we've had. So this is a small EMS agency to the south of us, and they only have EMT basics. They do not have paramedics on their trucks. And so from visiting with them, I found out that they were doing 12-lead EKGs, but they didn't have the capabilities of transmitting to them to anybody, and they weren't allowed to interpret them and make a decision on which facility that patient needed to go to based on that 12-lead. Because it was not within their scope of practice. And so their medical director had told them that every single patient was to be brought to our Porter campus, which is not our PCI center. So STEMIs were being brought to our referral facility. And so I worked with them, got in touch with their medical director, and just discussed changing our process and bringing those heart patients to our PCI center. And, there was the issue that they can't interpret the 12 leads to make that decision. And so I applied for a grant, and I got them the modules that they needed to be able to transmit the EKGs to us. And so after doing that, they started transmitting all their EKGs to our hospital, and then they would call us, and our physicians would interpret for them and then direct them which facility was appropriate for them to transfer the patients. And so by doing that, we were able to take off, around 30 minutes of time on those STEMI patients. And so it was a huge success, and we had great outcomes with that. And so it was really exciting. And, none of that would have happened if I just hadn't have been going there and talking to them about, what their obstacles were, what their frustrations were, and how I could help them. So also another way that you can coordinate with them is provide continuing education classes to them. We were having issues with meeting some of our metrics, and so I talked to one of our EMS agencies, and they said they're always looking for continuing education credits. And they said, as long as you get it approved where they can get CEs, they'd probably love to come. So that may be an option for you if, there's something that you need to get in front of them and do some education on, is get it approved for CE credits and do a class and invite them. Also, if your hospital has courses that they offer, maybe you can get it approved where they can attend as well. We're lucky because our main EMS agency, they're employees of the hospital, so they have access to these classes. But some of the smaller agencies, or if you're not affiliated with the hospital, they don't have all of these opportunities. So even if you just include them in your BLS, ACLS classes, and then some other options could be like 12-lead classes, any critical care courses, or employee development classes. I know we did a class on ECMO because we transfer out patients on ECMO to one of the larger hospitals. And so they attended because they're the ones that are going to be helping transport those patients. And then last is cath lab observations. So maybe they are able to come and spend a day where they can shadow somebody in the cath lab. If not, at least encourage them to stay. Once they bring you a STEMI patient, say you're welcome to stay and watch, and let them see what, happens after they drop that patient off. I know this is talked about a lot, is the feedback. So we've had a previous conference in this series, or a webinar in this series about feedback. And so this is an example of our feedback flyer for STEMIs. And it's a great opportunity to give that feedback to EMS. Some of the things that we include in it is our time goals, timestamps, the name of the staff, that way they can be recognized, images, the before and after images of, the CAF, some patient history, the EKG, and then a brief summary of the outcome of the patient. So a lot of times they don't get that kind of information. They don't know what happened to the patient after they drop them off. And they may not know if they even, what the goals were or if they were met. So by providing them these flyers, it helps involve them and, share that responsibility in the outcome of the patient. And you want to make sure you get this to them as soon as possible. So, either the next day or a couple days later. That way that patient is still fresh in their mind. Because if you wait too long, then it may not mean as much to them. So another way that you can engage them is, another way that you can collaborate with them is to engage them in quality improvement. Include them in your hospital AMI quality committees. So we have a group that meets quarterly, and we call it the Chest Pain Council, and we review our metrics, and so we include EMS in that meeting. And then we also include them, some of the leaders are invited to our emergency department meeting as well. And then you want to share your performance data with them. And so basically we want to make sure that our metrics that we present at these meetings do include EMS metrics and things that apply to them. And then encourage them to participate in creative problem solving and consider piloting process improvement protocols. So if you invite them to these meetings, then they can be a part of when you set your performance improvement goals for the year. Maybe make sure you set one of your goals of your metrics to include them. And then maybe if you want to work on a process improvement initiative, choose one that includes them as well. So let's see. So here's an example of some shared practices and protocols. So in our committee, we decided that with so many EMS agencies bringing us patients, that it would help if we had a shared practice or protocol. And so Oklahoma, we don't have a state system of care that's mandated. We don't have protocols that are mandated. And so not everybody may practice the same. And so this is our recommended protocol that we share with the EMS agencies. And so when I go around and visit, I usually have a padded stack of these, and I give that to them to keep in their ambulances or on their trucks. And so one side of it has, what the STEMI, what a STEM, like ST elevation or left bundle branch block, and then it tells them to complete the checklist on the other side. And so it has like metrics and guidelines as well. So we want them to have first medical contact to arriving at the referral center in less than 45 minutes. If they're greater than a 90-minute from arrival to PCI time is anticipated, then consider transporting by air or something like that. And then it's got phone numbers for them to call as well. So if they're not really familiar, they don't bring us a lot of patients all the time, then this is helpful. It's just right there for them to have access to those phone numbers. And then we've included phone numbers for the different flight agencies in case that patient is too far out and they need to call. And then another thing that we give them to keep on the trucks is a map. So a lot of times, they're having to transport the patient to us, and they're having to tell family members how to get to this hospital. And so we thought this would be helpful for them. They can just tear this page off, hand it to the family members, and it saves them time in having to explain where that loved one is going and all of that. So these are some of the tools that we came up to work to help them out. And then also we have pathways. So sometimes we share these with them as well. It's just kind of what our process, in the best case scenario, what our process would look like for caring for that patient, what the steps should be. And this is, constantly changing. Sometimes we decide that a different practice would work better, and so we are working together to perfect our process. So you want to include them in trialing new processes. So one of the things that we've worked on is so years ago, I think it's probably been about 6 years, our hospital just went through chest pain accreditation. And before that, the cardiologist was the one that was activating the STEMI. And so we really had to work with EMS and everybody to give them responsibility to activate the STEMI from the field. So those are, that's an example of something that you could work together on. Other things are maybe bypassing the ED or doing a brief pause in the emergency department and leaving them on the EMS stretcher rather than taking them off, putting them in a bed in the emergency department and then having to go down and transport them. We try to leave them on the EMS stretcher, do the quick assessment, and then get them to the cath lab. Other things like drawing labs in the field. So one of our agencies actually draws the blood for us and brings in the tubes, or pre-registration. So they call in the patient information and we register the patient before they even arrive to the hospital. So those are just examples of some things that you could work with them on. And then when you include them in your quality meetings, it's important that you do case reviews. So this has been something that's been really great. We've started really focusing on those patients that were outliers or activations without intervention or false activations, activations that were not called in the field, but then we activated them once they got here, or activations without EKG transmissions. Sometimes they'll call them in the field, but we won't get the transmission, and then we end up canceling them once they get here. And so we review all of those, and we learn a lot from those patient reviews. And so that's a great thing to include in your quality meetings. And then also, a lot of times when I see these patients come across, I will email the medical director and the EMS chief and say, hey, this was a outlier or this was a false activation. And it's not that we did anything wrong. It's not punitive, but it's a good opportunity for just education and review. A lot of times they'll go back to those medics and just go over the case with them, review the EKG, and use it as an educational opportunity. This is another example of some feedback or some information data that we provided in our quality meeting. So I kept telling them we're not meeting our first medical contact to PCI. And until I actually put it on a chart, and then they would ask all these questions. Well, what was the field time? What was this time? And so I broke it down. I gave detailed information about the outliers. And so I wanted to stress how important data is in driving change, because you can tell them we're not meeting our goals, we're not doing well, but sometimes you really have to break it down and give them all the information to get their buy-in that we're really not doing that well and we need to make some improvements. And this is also, I guess it's important that you make sure that when you do have successes, that you celebrate them. So sometimes I think we get used to just giving them all the bad stuff, or let's review all these outliers, or we're not meeting our goals. And so it's important that you do also point out the good things that you're doing and you encourage them. And so I came across this when I was doing some of my research, and I thought this was great. It's called the STEMI Emmy. And so this hospital gives out a quarterly award to they have several EMS agencies, but the EMS agency that had the best first medical contact to PCI for that quarter gets the STEMI Emmy. And so I thought that was a really neat idea, and I might steal it. So just try to think of ways that you can help celebrate successes. So, I've given you all of these examples of ways that you can, improve your collaboration with EMS. Sorry, I don't know why that slide went back. Let me go back. It says that I lost control.
Try to double click and see if you can get it.
No.
Okay. Are we on the next slide, or do we need to
go back a slide?
There you go.
Okay, so, I've talked about all of these things that we're doing, or things, best practice recommendations to improve EMS collaboration. But I wanted to, kind of share with you what our experience has been with all of this, because we haven't always done all of these things and had great relationships with our agencies. So you can see, back in 2016, quarter one, this is our first medical contact to PCI metric. And so we were at close to 30% of our STEMIs that were being brought in from the field were being done within the 90-minute window. And so to kind of share with you, we had at that point in time, we had lost the chest pain coordinator. We didn't have a manager of the cath lab, and we also did not have a service line director. So we were going through a huge change in leadership. And so I was trying to collect and submit data and then manage the cath lab. And so it was kind of crazy at that time. So once we got everybody staffed and I was able to, fill this position as the coordinator, I was really focused on just the data and getting my data collected and, looking at the numbers and presenting them, but I really wasn't focusing on what I was going to do to make it better. And I had a great director, my new service line director, kept telling me, you need to go out and visit the EMS agencies. And so I kept saying, well, I'm too busy. And so finally, I decided our numbers are not getting any better. I've got to do something. And so I decided I'm going to start with one of the EMS providers that were falling out on all of our first medical contacts to PCI metrics. And so I gave them all this data. I prepared all this data, and I brought it to them. And after meeting with them, I found out there were things that we could improve on that we weren't doing right. A lot of times we weren't trusting their judgment. We weren't activating the STEMI until the patient actually arrived to our emergency department and we got our own EKG. And then also they would get the EKG and maybe wait 15, 20 minutes to let us know they're bringing us that STEMI patient because they felt they were just so far away. They had time, They weren't thinking about the sooner they call us, the sooner we call the cath lab in. So it's amazing how you just start calling and talking to them and collaborating, and our numbers just improved drastically once I started going out there and doing outreach and getting to know them and working with them better. And so I just wanted to use this as an example of how, just doing these things can really make a huge improvement in your quality. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Mission Lifeline, since this is, American Heart Association webinar. And so Mission Lifeline, their purpose is to connect EMS providers and referring facilities and PCI centers and develop a coordinated system of care. Basically, the hospital is going to be the leader of that system of care, and we're the ones that can help drive change. And by participating in the Get With the Guidelines and the Mission Lifeline initiatives, that's the way that we're going to be able to build our system of care. And so basically, Mission Lifeline STEMI systems of care is basically implementation, streamlines care, and streamlines care across a geographical region. So some states have a system of care in place. Some regions have systems of care in place. Here in Oklahoma, we're still working on all of that. And so really it is up to our hospital to lead a system of care. And so basically you do that by just developing a region that's working together on this STEMI initiative. and sharing data and, working on processes to improve together. And I wanted to say, if you go on the Mission Lifeline website, this is what I found on one of the pages on the website. There's resources for you, and so they give you opportunities to improve your system of care. And so I circled the two that involve EMS collaboration. And then if you click on them, it takes you further in there, like what is your opportunity to work on? So pre-hospital cath lab activation protocols, and it even gives you guidelines on who you should include in your team and what your outcomes should be. And so I just wanted to stress the importance of Mission Lifeline and how it can really help you. And then also you have a quality director for your area that you can work with. I know I work with mine quite a lot, and we're trying to work together to improve our processes. And this is another example of what I found on their website, just examples of ways that you can improve your system of care. And then also the Mission Lifeline EMS, they have an EMS award and recognition. And so basically that is just celebrating the achievement of the pre-hospital providers and their ability to collaborate with the hospital in order to, get that quality STEMI care. And so the EMS award is a lot like the hospital award. There's 3 levels: bronze, silver, and gold. And basically kind of similar, you have the 75% requirement on your measures, and I included basically these are the different metrics. So there's like 4 measures that are mandatory, and then there's a plus measure option. So for the EMS, they're looking at 12-lead EKG acquisition. Like, are they getting them on those chest pain patients? And then are they getting them within 10 minutes? And then they look at the first medical contact to PCI within 90 minutes. And so that's why it's important that you guys have a relationship with these EMS agencies, because they're going to need that data from you to help them, submit for this application. And so I work closely with our EMS agency to get them that information. And so it's just important. It's another way that we can recognize them and include them as part of our team because they're essential for the patient's outcome. And so when we do our Mission Lifeline, we actually do a joint application. So we not only recognize our EMS agency, but we also recognize the fire, the police, and then dispatch. And so, we have one award, but we recognize all these different entities that are part of that as well. And so that's all I have provided for you. So if you guys have any questions.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And just as a reminder to everyone, if you would like to come off mute with your phone line, you can press star 6. And I will go ahead and check to see if we have any questions in the Q&A section of WebEx. Just a reminder, EMS week is the week of May 19th. I believe someone gave us that info. I don't see any other questions, but I know I wanted to know, how did you find the grant that you applied for to get the equipment for the EMS agency?
That one was actually through our hospital foundation, and so a lot of times they only provide those grants for things within the hospital, but I had to prove to them that it was really important for our hospital. So although the grant was going to an outside, provider, it was truly affecting the quality of care for our patients. And so I really had to prove my case to them, and they did approve it though. I've also worked with another EMS agency. They needed new monitors, and so I just did some research online and gave them some links. I think one of them is the Firehouse Subs. They do a lot of in our area at least, they do grants for EMS agencies, and so I gave them that information. So, just trying to help them any way that you can.
Great. We did have another question come in. Are you finding, how are you overcoming barriers with hospitals that are using different registries other than Mission Lifeline? Are you able to still use their data and kind of do some quality programs with them?
As far as other hospitals,
correct.
I don't really have to work with a lot of the other hospitals. So our EMS, when we're doing submission for the STEMIs, for the Mission Lifeline EMS Award, really it's kind of weird because we're so close. That's the only hospital that they're bringing these patients to. So when we've done our submission, it's really only the data from our hospital that they need on those STEMI metrics. So I haven't really had that obstacle where I've had to get data from the other hospitals as well. I think we're kind of unique because we're so far south of the metro area. I would think if you're those hospitals that probably are in the big cluster, I would think maybe, that would be hard to get that information.
Great. Would anyone like to come off mute with *6 to ask a question?
Good morning. My name is Brett Ober. I'm the EMS liaison in Las Vegas, Nevada. How are you today?
Good.
So the question that I have here is that you mentioned that you guys don't have any statewide EMS authority to regulate your protocols. So how do you guys compare data locally on your STEMI activations on your own, or is there a mechanism in place that you guys are able to do that?
Unfortunately, our state is really lacking in any STEMI information sharing. We did have a subcommittee, and the leadership in our state kind of fell apart, and so we're working to reestablish all of that. But right now, no. Truly, it's the hospital it's me trying to lead the EMS agencies that I work with. So we do have regional committees that get together, and honestly, I don't participate in those, so I don't know what they're discussing. But I know as far as statewide, there's nobody looking at those STEMI metrics currently. We don't have a mandatory registry or anything.
Great. Any other questions? Does anyone else like to come off mute, *6 to unmute your line?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, this is Trish with HCA Clear Lake in Mainland in Texas. My question is, how many assistants do you have on your chest pain team to help you? I hear that you've done a lot of process improvement on your EMS outcomes. Do you have a team in place that just works with EMS, or is it just a chest pain coordinator?
It's just me. So, I collect all of the data and stuff. So, I haven't done all of this overnight. This has taken me years and I just try to squeeze in what I can when I can. I do a lot of work during EMS week. I pretty much block my schedule the whole week, and I make sure I go and visit every single EMS agency. So some of them only bring us 1 or 2 STEMIs a year, and so I don't really visit those as often. I just make sure that I at least reach out to them during EMS week. And then also when they do bring us a STEMI, sometimes that's my opportunity where I make sure I go and visit them, and I'll bring them the STEMI flyer and make it a point to go and hand deliver that and visit them at that point in time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, this is Vicki Meyer. I'm with the Arkansas State Department of Health, and I used to be a STEMI nurse coordinator in Round Rock, Texas for the Baylor Scott and White system. I just wanted to say to everyone how important the EMS is to PCI hospitals. And one thing that we did during EMS week was we held a barbecue for them. And so it's pretty cool when you can walk outside and you see all these ambulance trucks, you know, all lined up, and they're coming in, and you're having food and drinks and some camaraderie and just getting to know them a little bit better. So it's just a suggestion for anyone out there.
Any other questions or comments? *6 to come off mute. I don't see anything else in the Q&A section of WebEx. And just a reminder, we will be sending information on how to claim your credits, today's slides, and the link to the recording for anyone who'd like to view this also. One last call for questions, *6 to come off mute. We are getting comments that this was a great presentation, Sarah, so thank you.
Aw, well, thank you guys. I don't do this very often, so I get a little nervous.
You did well. All right, well, I think that's going to be it for today's call. Reminder, if you want to register for next week's call, you can visit heart.org/SWA quality. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day. 10.